The family's loss. 1957. The Pollock family of Hexham, England, lived quietly with two daughters, 11-year-old Joanna and 6-year-old Jacqueline. The girls were inseparable, sharing toys, secrets, and laughter that brightened their modest family home. Joanna was protective and mature, often guiding her younger sister through daily adventures in their neighborhood. Jacqueline was playful and curious, clinging closely to her older sister for comfort and companionship. Their parents, John and Florence, cherished their bond and took pride in raising two spirited daughters. Sundays were a treasured family tradition, with church attendance followed by walks through the town streets. On May 5, 1957, the sisters walked to Sunday school with friends, just as they had many times before, but on this morning, tragedy struck when a car suddenly lost control on the narrow Hexham road. The vehicle veered directly into the path of the children, hitting Joanna and Jacqueline without warning. Both sisters were killed instantly, leaving their small community in shock and disbelief. News of the accident spread quickly, casting a heavy silence over the tight-knit town of Hexham. The Pollock family's home became filled with grief, the sound of laughter replaced by unbearable quiet. Florence collapsed in sorrow, struggling to accept that her daughters' lives had ended so abruptly. John grieved deeply but clung to faith, believing that death might not be the final chapter. Friends and neighbors visited with condolences, but no words could soothe the parents' pain. At the funeral, townspeople gathered in solidarity, carrying flowers and prayers for the lost children. The sight of two small coffins side by side was an image that haunted the community. Florence moved mechanically through the services, barely able to speak or stand from the weight of grief. John prayed fervently, not only for peace, but for a sign that his daughters' souls lived on. His belief in reincarnation, once private, grew louder as he searched for meaning amid tragedy. Many neighbors whispered that John's ideas were strange, dismissing them as coping mechanisms. But John insisted his dreams of Joanna and Jacqueline were more than imagination, they were visits. He described vivid encounters where his daughters smiled, assuring him they would return one day. Florence resisted such claims, fearing they might deepen their sorrow or cloud their healing, yet even she sometimes sensed their presence. As if their energy lingered in the family home, the girls' belongings remained untouched, their toys, clothes, and drawings carefully preserved by Florence. Photographs stayed on the walls, their young faces frozen in time as reminders of happier days. At night, Florence thought she heard faint giggles echo through the hallways, stirring both comfort and fear. John reassured her that these were not tricks of grief, but signs the girls had not gone far. His conviction unsettled some, but it gave him the strength to endure unbearable loss. Every May 5th, the family lit candles at the gravesite, whispering prayers for the daughters they adored. John promised his girls aloud that they would meet again in this life or another. He grew fascinated with spiritual writings, particularly stories of reincarnation across cultures. Florence tried to ignore his obsession, but secretly began journaling her own dreams of the girls. In those dreams, Joanna and Jacqueline appeared alive, guiding her with familiar affection. Birthdays passed with painful emptiness, chairs left vacant at the family's small dining table. Christmas celebrations became muted, their stockings still hung but never filled again. Relatives urged the Pollocks to move forward, but the parents could not accept such finality. John insisted their daughters' lives had not ended but transformed into another beginning. He told Florence, "Our story with them is not finished, fate will bring them back." His unwavering faith created tension as Florence struggled between rational doubt and hidden hope. At church, John's prayers focused less on healing and more on reunion with his lost children. Parishioners grew uneasy, avoiding conversations when John spoke of souls and rebirth. Still, a few admitted his conviction stirred unsettling questions in their own hearts. Florence feared his obsession, yet sometimes caught herself believing he might be right. John noted strange signs, flickering lights at night and children's laughter carried faintly on the wind. Florence outwardly dismissed them but privately recorded each occurrence in her journal. She confessed to herself that the boundary between grief and the supernatural felt thinner than ever. Their community moved on, but the Pollocks remained trapped in cycles of mourning and strange hope. For John, the accident was not the end of the story, but the opening to something profound. Florence visited the girls' bedroom often, sitting among their toys in quiet reflection. She could not bring herself to give away their belongings, clinging to them like sacred relics. John spent hours at the grave, speaking as though his daughters still heard him clearly. He told them of daily events, believing his words crossed the veil of death. His conviction brought him solace, though Florence worried it prevented true healing. The townspeople grew weary of John's talk of reincarnation, labeling him eccentric in his grief. Yet his faith never wavered, and over time even skeptics grew unsettled by his certainty. Florence's resistance softened, her private dreams reinforcing the possibility that John might be right. She admitted to feeling her daughter's nearness, though she dared not say it aloud often. For both parents, tragedy became both wound and anchor, shaping every moment that followed. Their grief made them cautious, yet they remained deeply devoted to each other. The accident's memory cast a shadow over their lives, but also bound them in shared loss. Photographs of Joanna and Jacqueline remained centerpieces of their household, reminders of love and tragedy. The family preserved their daughter's memory with rituals of prayer and storytelling, but unknown to them, destiny was preparing to reopen the story in ways unimaginable. By mid-1958, Florence discovered she was pregnant. Again, shocking the family and neighbors alike. Her emotions were mixed: joy at new life, fear of more loss, and guilt for moving forward. John, however, received the news as confirmation of his deepest belief. He proclaimed the unborn child was proof his daughter's souls would soon return. Florence wept, unsure whether to feel comforted or terrified by his certainty. The pregnancy progressed normally, yet Florence noticed an unusual intensity in John's demeanor. He spoke often of Joanna and Jacqueline, convinced they would come back through the new child. Neighbors warned Florence to be cautious of John's obsession with reincarnation. But Florence felt torn. Part of her longed for it to be true. Every movement of the baby filled her with a mix of dread and fragile hope. As her due date approached, Florence prayed silently for peace and strength. John prayed for reunion, certain fate was about to deliver something miraculous. The family braced for change, still scarred by tragedy but holding a fragile sense of anticipation. Florence kept her dreams private, where she saw her daughters smiling at her. Once more, John's unwavering faith made her wonder if perhaps he had glimpsed truths she could not. The community looked on with curiosity, waiting to see what this new chapter would bring. Rumors circulated that the Pollocks expected replacements for the children they had lost. Florence resented the word but admitted she feared the same thought herself. John countered that souls could never be replaced, only reborn. The couple moved forward with both dread and anticipation as the pregnancy reached its final days. On October 4, 1958, Florence went into labor at Hexham General Hospital. The experience filled her with equal parts fear of loss and longing for healing. After long hours, the nurses announced an outcome that stunned everyone present. Florence had not delivered a single child but 2 healthy twin girls. John cried out, convinced in that moment his prayers had been answered. For him, the birth of twins was no coincidence but divine confirmation of his belief. Florence, exhausted, stared at her daughters with awe and uncertainty, sensing destiny at work. The family now had 2 new lives, Gillian and Jennifer, to raise with love and care. Yet beneath the joy lingered questions about fate, memory, and the meaning of rebirth. And so part 1 ends, leading into part 2, the astonishing arrival of the Pollock twins in 1958. In October 1958, just over a year after tragedy, Florence Pollock discovered she was expecting another child. The pregnancy shocked neighbors, who thought grief had left the couple too broken to think of new life. John viewed the pregnancy as divine proof that fate still had plans for their family. He told Florence, "Our story with Joanna and Jacqueline is not finished yet, I feel it." Florence, still fragile from grief, was hesitant but clung to hope for healing through new children. On October 4, 1958, Florence gave birth to twin girls, a rare outcome in a family with no twin history. The arrival of two daughters immediately stirred whispers of destiny, coincidence, and divine intervention. John was convinced these twins were connected to Joanna and Jacqueline in ways no one yet understood. The twins were named Gillian and Jennifer, each healthy yet carrying subtle distinctions. From their earliest days, John noticed details he believed linked them to their deceased sisters. Jennifer bore a birthmark across her waist identical to Jacqueline's scar from a childhood accident. She also had a distinctive mark above her right eye, exactly where Jacqueline had received an injury. Gillian, meanwhile, displayed facial features more in line with Joanna, the elder sister lost in 1957. These small details only deepened Johnny's conviction that reincarnation was unfolding before his eyes. Florence dismissed such ideas at first, insisting the twins deserved to be seen as themselves. Yet as weeks passed, Florence admitted she too noticed uncanny similarities to her late daughters. When Gillian smiled, Florence swore she saw Joanna's gentle, protective nature reflected in her. When Jennifer cried for comfort, Florence said it felt like Jacqueline's vulnerability had returned. Their personalities seemed to align, with the late sisters Gillian as guiding, Jennifer as dependent. Friends remarked quietly about the resemblance, though most avoided fueling John's theories. The Pollocks decided to raise their new daughters with love but remained watchful for signs of the unusual. Their grief lessened slightly as the twins filled the house again with noise and laughter. Still, John insisted the family preserve the old toys and belongings of Joanna and Jacqueline. He told Florence, "Let us see what happens when the twins are old enough to choose." Though uneasy, Florence agreed, allowing their past to linger in the home as a quiet test. Photographs of Joanna and Jacqueline remained on the walls, eyes that seemed to watch over the twins. Neighbors whispered privately, wondering if the Pollocks were clinging too tightly to the past. Yet many admired their courage to move forward despite the unbearable pain of loss. The twins grew quickly, learning to walk and speak, drawing admiration from the community. But small things emerged that reignited the Pollocks' deepest questions. Jennifer showed a strong preference for Jacqueline's old doll, which had been packed away in storage. Gillian gravitated toward Joanna's old toys, recognizing them without any guidance or prompting. When Florence brought out clothing from the past, the twins seemed to claim certain items. John quietly noted which twin aligned with which deceased sister, his faith unshaken. Florence grew conflicted, torn between rational explanations and unsettling observations. At family gatherings, relatives sometimes slipped and called the twins by the names Joanna and Jacqueline. The resemblance in behavior was strong enough to confuse even extended family. John felt vindicated, telling anyone who would listen that reincarnation was unfolding in their own home. Florence grew uneasy, fearing the twins' identities might be overshadowed by memories of the past. But still, the parallels multiplied with every passing year. Jennifer disliked bright clothing, just as Jacqueline had, favoring plain styles instead. Gillian displayed a nurturing side, often stepping in to mother her sister, echoing Joanna's role. Their mannerisms, small gestures, even their laughter carried echoes of the late sisters. Family friends described the experience of watching them as living. It became impossible for the Pollocks to ignore the connections. Teachers at nursery school noticed their distinct personalities, mirroring what teachers had once said of Joanna and Jacqueline. Florence recalled moments when the twins would speak of accidents they could not possibly know. John interpreted this as proof, while Florence struggled to explain how they knew such things. Their growing similarities began to attract quiet interest from beyond their small town. Soon, the Pollocks realized their family mystery was about to reach a much larger stage. As newspapers picked up the story, neighbors grew cautious, unwilling to talk openly about the twins. Some believed in John's claims, while others dismissed them as desperate grief. Florence endured judgment, accused by some of encouraging fantasy instead of reality. Yet even she admitted that certain events defied easy explanation. The twins' uncanny likeness to their late sisters persisted into early childhood. John began keeping detailed notes of behaviors, convinced they would one day be studied by researchers. He recorded Jennifer's birthmarks, toy preferences, and moments of recognition she should not have had. He documented Gillian's protective behavior, her leadership role echoing Joanna's personality. Florence contributed reluctantly. Yet she too admitted the evidence was disturbing. These notes would later form the foundation of the case studied worldwide. As the twins turned 3, they began speaking with startling clarity about things they had never been told. They referenced names of toys, games, and family activities from before their birth. One day, Jennifer pointed at Florence and said, "You remember when I hurt my head?" The comment froze Florence, recalling Jacqueline's head injury years before Jennifer was born. Gillian asked for a toy hidden in the attic, one that only Joanna had played with. Such incidents multiplied, leaving the Pollocks speechless and searching for answers. Florence began to wonder if John's unwavering faith had been justified all along. Yet she feared what this meant. If the twins were truly reincarnated, what did it reveal about life itself? Friends and relatives urged them to focus on raising the girls normally. But the Pollocks could not ignore what they were witnessing inside their own home. Photographs of Joanna and Jacqueline continued to hang in the house, bridging past and present. The twins, still too young to fully understand, would sometimes point and identify them. They once said, "That's us," when we were little, shocking their parents into silence. John embraced the statement, while Florence wept, overwhelmed by the impossible. The Pollocks now lived in a constant tension between disbelief and wonder. As time went on, their strange story attracted the curiosity of outsiders. Word spread of the Hexham twins, who seemed to carry memories from another life. Journalists began contacting the Pollocks, hoping to document their experiences. John welcomed the attention, seeing it as validation of his long-held beliefs. Florence remained protective, fearing exploitation of her daughter's innocence. Yet the story could not remain private forever. The signs were too compelling. Each new incident added to the weight of their family's extraordinary tale. Soon, researchers from beyond England began hearing whispers of the twins' case. Academics and parapsychologists from the United States showed particular interest. For them, the Pollock twins were becoming a living case study of reincarnation. As Gillian and Jennifer turned 4, their memories and behaviors grew even stronger. Their playtime often reflected activities from Joanna and Jacqueline's short lives. Neighbors recalled chilling conversations overheard during games that resembled the past exactly. The Pollocks found themselves at the center of a growing mystery they could not control. They realized what began with tragedy was turning into something larger than their family. By now, the twins were making statements that demanded explanation beyond coincidence. Researchers from abroad prepared to document what was happening in Hexham. The Pollock family braced themselves, knowing their lives were about to change forever. The strange memories of Gillian and Jennifer were just beginning to unfold. The year is 1961. A family in New Zealand was going about their daily life when suddenly their young daughter uttered something that would change everything. She said she wanted to go to her sister's room, which was strange because she wasn't old enough to remember that there even was such a room, or a sister for that matter. Because up until that point, the only siblings she'd ever known were her twin sister and her brother. So what could it be that she remembered from another life? Welcome back, I'm here, and today we're answering the extraordinary question: what do identical twin girls remember living a previous life? If that sounds interesting, then stick around, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let's jump right into it. By the time these twin girls were 2 years old, they were already acting strange. They began playing with their parents' wedding photo albums and would uncannily recognize certain pictures, particularly those of their older sisters. Now you might think that this isn't all that odd, especially if they've got big sisters. But these photos were of girls who had died before the twins were even born. Their names were Florence and Jacqueline Pollock, and they were the older sisters of these now living twins. It was strange how the girls knew so much about them, but it got stranger. Gillian and Jennifer also started to look for specific dolls around the house. One of them always asked for Jacqueline's dolly, while the other would always ask for my dolly. Each girl would claim that the other one's doll was not theirs, which was weird. Considering that they were identical twins, it was almost like they each believed they were Jacqueline. This wasn't the only uncanny recognition they displayed either. At one point, they started to insist that the yellow house down the street was theirs and that they used to live there. This house hadn't been occupied for several years and no one had lived there since before the girls were born, so how did they know anything about it? Their mother was unsure how to explain it, but she was deeply unsettled by it. Things really began to unravel when their mother, Florence, went through some old photo albums of the family. In one of the photos, she saw that there was a birthmark on one of the twins that looked an awful lot like a burn mark. Jennifer had the exact same mark in the same place. Then she noticed that Jacqueline, the sister that had died, had an accident when she was little that left a burn-shaped scar on her leg. When she checked, Jennifer had the same scar in the same place. How was this possible? It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? As time passed, the girls grew older and they continued to display strange behavior. As they got a little bit older, they began to remember more about their previous life. They recalled specific games that they played with their sisters, including hide and seek. They also remembered specific places where they played, like the backyard, treehouse. None of this was unusual, but it became increasingly creepy as they revealed more and more information. At one point, they recalled that their sister used to call them by a particular nickname, and when their mother checked old letters written by the deceased girl, she found that she had used that very nickname. The girls also began remembering things that only the deceased sisters could have known, like stories about their childhood and games they used to play. They even described certain items of clothing that the sisters used to wear. What's really strange is that these memories were very detailed. They weren't just things like I used to play in the garden. These were things like I used to play with my friends in the garden on Tuesday afternoons after school. How is it that they remembered these things? Did they really live a previous life, or are there other potential explanations? For the parents, though, it was hard to know what to make of all of this. On the one hand, they didn't want to believe that their daughters were somehow reincarnated, but on the other hand, they were struggling to come up with any other explanation for the things they were seeing and hearing. Was there something wrong with their children? Should they take the girls to see a doctor? Or was this simply a miracle? And as time went on, more and more people wanted answers. While it started out as a quiet family mystery, word got out and soon researchers from all over the world were asking if they could study the girls. Some people thought that this was evidence of reincarnation, while others dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. There were many skeptics, but there were also many believers. Ultimately, the family decided to keep their lives private. They didn't want to be subjects of public fascination or ridicule, but that doesn't mean that the story ended there. As the girls grew older, they continued to have strange experiences. They both dreamed of the same things at the same time, and they often had vivid memories of their previous lives. In fact, their memories were so detailed that they even knew things that hadn't happened yet. They predicted things that would happen in the future, and every single prediction they made came true. Once again, there were many skeptics who dismissed their claims, but there were also many believers. Some people even suggested that the girls were psychics. But what is the truth? Did these girls really live a previous life? Well, that's up for you to decide. Some people say that there's no way that this could be real, while others say that it's a clear case of reincarnation. There is no denying that there are some strange things going on here. The girls clearly know more than they should know, and there are physical signs that point to the fact that they may have lived a previous life. That being said, there are many skeptics who believe that there is a more logical explanation for everything, perhaps. The girls heard stories about their sisters and simply remembered them. Maybe they picked up on their parents' emotions and knew something was going on. Or maybe they were simply making it all up. It's hard to know for sure. What do you think happened in this case? Do you think the Pollock twins really remember living a previous life, or do you think there is another explanation for what happened? Please let me know in the comments below. Before we go, let's take a quick recap of this strange and mysterious event. It all started when the twin girls were just 2 years old and they began displaying strange behavior. They knew things that they shouldn't know, like games that their deceased sisters used to play and places that they used to visit. They also had physical signs that pointed to the fact that they may have lived a previous life, like birthmarks in the same place as their sisters' scars. As the girls grew older, their memories became more vivid and they began to predict things that would happen in the future. Some people believe that this is evidence of reincarnation, while others believe that there's a more logical explanation. Ultimately, the truth is up to you to decide. Thank you for watching. I've been your host. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. We'll see you next time. By the early 1960s, word of the Pollock twins' unusual behaviors reached beyond Hexham into national attention. British journalists reported on the strange case, stirring curiosity and skepticism among readers. Headlines described children who remember lives they never lived, fueling whispers of reincarnation. John Pollock openly welcomed the coverage, seeing it as validation of his unwavering belief. Florence remained cautious, fearing media intrusion into her daughter's fragile childhood. Among those intrigued was Dr. Ian Stevenson, a Canadian-born psychiatrist working in the United States. Stevenson had begun compiling cases of children who spoke of past lives, hoping to study them scientifically. The Pollock twins quickly rose to the top of his interest list, described as one of the strongest examples. He traveled to England to interview the family, documenting their words, memories, and behaviors. His methods included detailed notes, comparisons, and cross-checking with real events. Stevenson was struck by Jennifer's birthmarks, identical to Jacqueline's past injuries. He noted how Gillian consistently aligned with Joanna's role as the protective older sister. The parallels between the twins and their deceased siblings were too precise to dismiss as chance. Stevenson concluded the case warranted serious consideration. Within parapsychology research, American researchers soon debated his findings in academic journals and conferences. Some praised Stevenson for his courage in exploring taboo questions of memory and identity. Others criticized him, claiming he read too much into coincidences and parental influence. Still, the Pollock case became one of his most cited examples in his studies. Stevenson included it in his groundbreaking book 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. The case reached classrooms and lecture halls across the US as a fascinating puzzle. Students in psychology courses debated whether memory could transfer across lives. Some argued genetics or subconscious parental suggestion explained the twins' knowledge. Others believed the case hinted at survival of consciousness after death. The Pollock twins became symbols of the broader debate between science and spirituality. Their names entered academic literature far beyond their small hometown. Researchers documented specific incidents, such as the girls identifying toys without guidance. They noted the consistency of their statements over time, which matched real past events. Stevenson emphasized how their memories were spontaneous, not prompted by parental questioning. He argued this set them apart from cases of suggestion or coaching. The Pollock twins became a gold standard for reincarnation research worldwide. American media soon amplified the story, publishing features in newspapers and magazines. Journalists describe the twins as living proof of reincarnation or a mystery science can not solve. Public fascination grew, blending curiosity, skepticism, and wonder. Talk shows debated the case, pitting scientists against spiritual leaders. The Pollock Twins story crossed the Atlantic, sparking international intrigue. In England, the family received letters from strangers sharing similar stories of children with past life memories. Florence responded politely but kept her distance, worried about exploitation. John corresponded eagerly, convinced their family was part of a larger phenomenon. Stevenson continued his visits, returning to check consistency as the twins grew older. He found their accounts remained steady until about age 7, when memories faded. This fading mirrored patterns he observed in other children's past life memory cases. Skeptics saw fading as proof the memories were imagination that diminished with age. Believers saw fading as further evidence fragments of past lives carried only in early years. American universities debated the case in philosophy and religious studies courses. Professors used it to challenge students on questions of mind, memory, and survival. The case caught the attention of parapsychology organizations across the US. Some groups hailed it as their strongest evidence for reincarnation. Others urged caution, warning that anecdotal evidence could not prove scientific theories. The Pollock twins stood at the center of an academic tug-of-war between believers and skeptics. Yet their story refused to fade into obscurity, sustaining debate for decades. Gillian and Jennifer grew up aware of their unusual fame, though their parents tried to shield them. They answered Stevenson's questions but lived otherwise ordinary lives. Florence struggled to balance protecting them with honoring the reality of their memories. John embraced the attention, believing his daughters were instruments of divine proof. The twins themselves seemed puzzled by the attention, unaware of their case's significance. Researchers documented not only the memories but the girls' mannerisms and play behaviors. Gillian consistently displayed protective instincts, much like Joanna had. Jennifer remained dependent and sensitive, mirroring Jacqueline's known traits. These behavioral parallels reinforce the idea of continuity between lives. Critics argued children often copy each other, downplaying the significance of these traits. Stevenson's field notes were later archived in the US, studied by generations of researchers. His work gave the case longevity far beyond the girls' childhood years. The Pollock twins appeared in textbooks on parapsychology and consciousness studies. Their story was told in conferences, documentaries, and even American TV specials. The case became a cultural reference point for reincarnation believers. Skeptical organizations like ZCOP challenged it. They argued selective memory, exaggeration, or coincidence could explain the Pollock's experiences. Yet even skeptics admitted the birthmarks aligned eerily with past injuries. The debate highlighted the difficulty of proving or disproving such cases. The Pollock twins remained firmly in the gray zone between fact and faith. American audiences became captivated by the case through popular magazines and radio shows. Parents wrote letters asking if similar cases meant their own children might hold past memories. The fascination touched a cultural nerve in post-war America's search for spiritual meaning. Churches and religious leaders weighed in, some condemning the story, others embracing it. The Pollock twins became part of a global conversation about life, death, and the soul. For John, the growing attention felt like vindication after years of ridicule. For Florence, it was overwhelming, forcing her daughters into a spotlight they never asked for. Gillian and Jennifer quietly lived their childhoods, though surrounded by extraordinary expectations. Neighbors in Hexham remained divided. Some believed, others avoided the subject entirely. The case kept Hexham's name alive in paranormal circles worldwide. Academic papers cited the twins as a benchmark case for serious discussion. Documentaries aired in the 1970s and 1980 seconds, retelling the story for new audiences. American universities continued to use the Pollock twins as a teaching example. Their story reached students in psychology, philosophy, and theology alike. Few other reincarnation cases ever gained as much attention. Even decades later, researchers still revisit the case, comparing it to modern reports of past life memory. The Pollock twins stand as one of the earliest well-documented examples in the Western world. Their story remains a cornerstone in debates about consciousness and human survival after death. For believers, the case is a symbol of hope that love and identity transcend mortality. For skeptics, it remains a reminder of how grief and suggestion can shape memory. Yet whether believer or skeptic, few deny the story's cultural and scientific impact. The Pollock twins' lives became more than personal tragedy. They became a global mystery. Their memories invited the world to question what we think we know about life and death. And so part 4 ends, leading directly into part 5, the long debate: coincidence, suggestion, or reincarnation. The Pollock twins case was no longer just a family story. It had become a battleground of ideas worldwide. As Gillian and Jennifer Pollock grew older, their unusual memories began to fade, just as Dr. Stevenson had observed in other cases. By the age of 7, the vivid recollections of Joanna and Jacqueline's lives grew faint, slipping quietly into the background. Yet the evidence recorded during their early childhood left a permanent mark on both their family and the world of research. John Pollock continued to insist that his daughters had returned, convinced reincarnation had unfolded before his very eyes. Florence remained more cautious, admitting something mysterious occurred but never fully embracing her husband's certainty. Researchers debated whether the fading memories disproved the reincarnation theory or supported its natural limits. Believers argued that children lose past life memories as they grow into their present identity. Skeptics countered that the fading showed the memories were illusions created by suggestion and imagination. The Pollock twins became symbols of the tension between belief and rational doubt. Their story refused to resolve neatly, forcing the world to live in ambiguity. In the United States, parapsychologists continued to cite the Pollock case in academic literature. Books on reincarnation use Gillian and Jennifer as examples of Western cases supporting past life memory. Documentaries aired across American television, portraying the twins as living mysteries. These programs reignited public fascination and invited new generations into the debate. University students watched with equal parts skepticism and wonder, debating the case in classrooms. Skeptical organizations pushed back, arguing the story was flawed and easily explained. They pointed to John's deep conviction as a father possibly shaping how the children were interpreted. They suggested Florence's grief and subtle cues could have influenced the twins unknowingly. Some even accused researchers of romanticizing the story to fit their beliefs. Yet none could fully explain the accuracy of the birthmarks and toy recognition. Religious communities also wrestled with the case, especially in predominantly Christian nations. Some rejected it outright, saying reincarnation clashed with their faith's teachings on life and afterlife. Others embraced it, seeing the twins as proof of divine mysteries beyond doctrine. The case even reached pulpits, inspiring sermons about the mysteries of the soul. It became more than science, it became a cultural crossroads of belief. In England, Hexham locals continued to recall the family with mixed feelings. Some sympathized deeply with the Pollocks, admiring their courage to face tragedy. Others dismissed the entire story as grief-driven fantasy, never truly believing. The twins themselves grew up in relative normalcy, their extraordinary childhood fading into history. Yet strangers continued to write letters, curious about their memories and identities. As adults, Gillian and Jennifer lived quiet lives, away from the spotlight of research. They rarely spoke publicly of their childhood memories, preferring private lives over fame. Occasionally, they confirmed details when approached by researchers but avoided sensationalism. This silence left the mystery intact, preserved rather than clarified. The Pollock case thus lived more in archives, books, and debates than in their own voices. Dr. Stevenson continued to reference the twins until his passing, cementing the case as central to his research. His field notes, preserved in archives, remain studied by modern scientists and parapsychologists. Each new generation re-examines the Pollock twins, hoping to finally solve the riddle. Some argue it remains the most compelling evidence for reincarnation in Western history. Others insist it shows only how grief and memory can shape extraordinary narratives. The debate itself has become as important as the details of the case. Believers see the Pollock twins as hope that love and family transcend death. Skeptics view them as a cautionary tale of bias and wishful thinking. Both sides acknowledge the case forces us to confront mysteries science cannot fully explain. The Pollock twins endure not because of answers but because of unanswered questions. Philosophers cite the case in discussions of consciousness and the nature of identity. Can memory belong to a soul, or is it merely a construct of brain and upbringing? The Pollock twins push the boundaries of these questions beyond theory into lived experience. Their case reminds us that human experience often escapes neat categories. They embody the intersection of science, faith, and mystery. For John, the case always remained proof of his faith. He died convinced his daughters had indeed returned to him through Gillian and Jennifer. Florence, more reserved, carried the mystery quietly, never denying what she had witnessed. Her journals reveal a woman torn between logic and the unexplainable. Together, their lives reflect both love's resilience and grief's transformation into hope. In pop culture, the Pollock twins appear in countless podcasts, books, and online forums. Paranormal enthusiasts discuss their story as evidence of life beyond death. True crime and mystery communities cite the case as one of history's strangest family sagas. The internet has given their story new life, shared to audiences worldwide. The debate continues in digital spaces just as fiercely as in academia. Modern psychologists revisit the case as an example of how memory, suggestion, and trauma interact. They argue the Pollock case is invaluable for understanding childhood development. Parapsychologists counter that it cannot be reduced to psychology alone. Both sides agree the story is unique, worthy of continued study. The case remains relevant even decades later, defying time as much as belief. The Pollock twins case highlights humanity's eternal hunger for answers about death and what lies beyond. It asks whether consciousness is bound to biology or whether it transcends into new lives. It forces us to question the limits of science when faced with extraordinary claims. And it reminds us that grief can open doors to mysteries otherwise left unexplored. In this way, the Pollock story is as much about the living as the dead. As the girls matured, their unusual childhood became less central to their identities. They pursued ordinary lives, careers, and families, leaving the past behind. Yet, no matter how far they moved, their story followed them quietly. Their names remained in books and research long after they stopped speaking of it. The Pollock twins became reluctant icons of mystery. In conferences today, the case is still debated by scientists and spiritualists. It continues to draw new questions without ever offering final answers. Its endurance proves the power of storytelling in shaping our understanding of reality. The Pollock twins remind us that the unexplained endures not because it convinces everyone, but because it refuses to die. Their story is retold again and again, never fading, always resurfacing. For believers, the twins' lives are reassurance that souls travel, that love is never lost. For skeptics, they are a study in how hope shapes perception and memory. For the curious, they are an invitation to wonder at what science has yet to grasp. No matter the lens, the Pollock twins remain unforgettable. They embody the eternal dance between the explainable and the unknown. The case challenges us to accept mystery without needing to resolve it. It suggests some stories exist to provoke thought rather than deliver answers. And perhaps that is why the Pollock twins endure decades later. Their story is less about proof and more about possibility. It asks each generation anew, what do you believe? Today, the Pollock case is remembered as one of the strongest and strangest reincarnation claims in history. It lives not in laboratories or courtrooms but in hearts, minds, and debates across the world. The twins' childhood has become a legend of mystery studies, never fully explained or forgotten. And so part 5 concludes, leaving us where the story began with loss, love, and unanswered questions. The Pollock twins case endures as one of history's great mysteries, forever unresolved, forever debated.